and welcome to the Burning Bush podcast. Oh, looks like the webcams got fucked up. I'll fix that, but we're gonna watch this video first.
I'm afraid your father will have to remain in his coma for several more months. We'll be feeding him pure meat through a tube just like you asked. In the meantime, let's go party all over Europe.
When people think of happiness or pursuing happiness, the first thing they think of is, well, it's a pretty selfish desire. I want to be happy for me. I mean, after all, who wants to be unhappy? But I'm here to tell you that, in fact, happiness is far, far, far more than a selfish desire. It's actually a moral obligation. Whether or not you're happy, and certainly whether or not you act happy, is a very, very altruistic endeavor. Yes, indeed, we have a moral obligation. Happy people make the world better. Unhappy people tend to make the world worse.
There's a scene in Pinocchio where Geppetto wishes on a star, right? And what it means is he lifts up his eyes beyond the horizon to something transcendent. And so he lifts his eyes up above his daily concerns and he says, what I want more than anything else is that my creation will become a genuine individual, right? It's a heroic gesture because it's so unlikely, and that catalyzes the puppet's transformation into a real being, and we start as puppets. And so the trick is to get rid of your goddamn strings.
I want to be like you, Mr. Peterson. Please tell me how to live.
I want to get into this because this is I think this is a fascinating thing with you personally. Your diet. You're on this carnivore diet now. This is what's fascinating to me is I haven't heard any negative stories about people doing this.
Well, I have a negative story.
Okay.
Okay. When we restricted our diet and then ate something we weren't supposed to, the reaction was absolutely catastrophic.
Is he getting more
What did you
So-
do? What did
Oh
you
my
switch
God,
to?
yeah.
Well, the worst response, we had some apple cider that had sulfites in it, and that was really not good. Like, I was done for a month.
You were done for a month.
Oh yeah, it took me out for a month. It was awful. because
Apple cider. Like, what was it doing?
sulfites in it.
What was it doing to you?
Oh,
hate it.
It produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom.
Come on over here. Jesus are intrinsically tied to the president. He's with us. He's for us.
If you love birds, you'd never want to walk under a windmill because it's a very sad, sad sight.
That's horrendous.
Can you link this?
Jesus said, take this cup. This is my blood of the new covenant.
I said certified freak 7 days a week. Wet ass P-word. Make that pull-out game weak.
Here is a fact. There's no God over me. There's no policeman over me. There's no one over me. I am God.
Someone took the time to make this.
Fucking cider.
Oh, I didn't sleep that month. I didn't sleep for 25 days. I didn't sleep
What?
at all.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, not
And
good.
this is
So
from fucking cider. From cider.
that's what we thought. Yeah. I mean, look, again, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Nation of audio
You
from the
need
Joe
to
Rogan
wake up,
podcast?
Dr. Peterson. My master. Please wake up
I hate
for
that.
us. We are so lost without you.
Twelve more rules. What is natural must be right. Eat your meat and worship might. Stand up straight, listen carefully, accept your place within the hierarchy.
Pinocchio.
My boy.
Why?
Is that Geppetto?
Yeah.
Boy.
Clean your
Jordan
room,
cannot believe his
pray
eyes.
to God, obey your lords with 12 new rules.
Oh my god.
Think of all the cash, think of all the suits. Don't you think the world needs 12 more rules?
You watch what you say, and you will find out
What is
some
natural
things you
must
say
be
make you come
right.
apart,
Eat
and
your
make you
meat
fall
and
apart.
worship
It's a
might.
feeling of chaotic
Stand up
weakness and
straight,
dissolution.
listen
It's
carefully,
a sense of
accept
self-betrayal.
your place
And then
within
if
the
you tell the
hierarchy.
truth, that pulls you together and strengthens you.
12 more rules. 12 more rules. 12 more rules.
Oh god, it's so big.
You're dead, Pinocchio.
I love how long this is. Oh, fuck it. Oh my god, okay, it's over. Okay.
Alrighty, well, that was our cold intro. Cosmic Horror Compilation 2020, allegedly. Hello, welcome everyone. It is I, UngoCast, and I'm brought here today with the recurring guest from last week, Dan Bolness. Hello, welcome back.
John.
As well as the good friend of the podcast, old god himself, Kevin Johnson here. How's it going, Kevin?
I'm doing pretty well. It's good to be back.
Well, we were talking about this last week. We wanted to get the podcast together with Kevin. We wanted to bring you back, Dan, and we wanted to discuss some things, and there's just so much to discuss. I kind of breezed over with both of you guys sort of the topics I wanted to go over today. If you want to hop right into that, we can do that, or we can just, how's it going besides that? How's your week,
Yeah.
Dan?
Good. Trying to be better, I guess. It's going good. I'm always simping though, so that's always fun. But I'm trying to be better, and I think it's going well. I've lost some weight, fit into my jeans real good.
There we go. Nice. No, always on a positive note. You're always simping. That's a positive for me as well.
It's a positive for me too. Pre-cum everywhere.
As always, you got to change your underwear pretty much
frequently
twice a day.
Frequently,
yeah, at least. How about you, Kevin? How's your week been?
Doing pretty well, just staying busy with work and, just gaming a lot, in my free time and, trying to find another job that is going to further my future and allow me to go where I want to and do the things I need to do. So, yeah, just trying to stay productive.
There you go. I feel it. Very, very good. And so, what was that? Are you good? You good, Dan? Is the KGB black team gonna?
I just said love that for you, Kevin.
So we wanted to get into some of like more slated topics this week. Some of the things I brought up with Dan and Kevin, in particular, as of recent, we've been going through a lot of stuff. 2020 was woo, and things have been slowly going in one direction or another, however you see it. And one of the things I want to talk about is the role of art in today's society. And what I mean by that is I use the word art as sort of just as a blanket term. My dog is like devouring the golf ball. But art as a blanket term for anything, whether it's movies, television, comic books. Dan, you're telling me about some interesting things
Batman's
about comic
penis.
books. Batman's penis is getting censored. He's
cut.
Previous?
He's cut.
Oh, they retconned his uncircumcised penis to a circumcised one.
He's definitely rocking the hard hat.
There we go. So there's things like well, there's things like that where in all forms of media and using the loose term of art to describe anything that is, for all intents and purposes, a creative work that has no minor educational background in it if it's some informational sort of product. But overall, we can all be kind of under the consensus that certain art forms are not, like, aside from our own well-being and making us happy, they're not critical to us, like, paying the bills, that sort of thing, right?
Yes.
And so I guess what I want to talk about was where we all stand, because I really want to hear both your opinions, and if you guys want to get into it, like where we should put media, for example, movies, in today's society. Like, how far is too far nowadays? And, like, is there anything that is sacred, or are there, like, boundaries we shouldn't cross? Or is that the point of art? Is the point of art that there's always boundaries to cross and that there are no boundaries? Like, either of you guys can feel free chime in. What do you guys think?
Do you want to go, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I can take a shot at it. I mean, in my opinion, I think art's a pretty broad, concept. I don't think that it really like covers one thing, as you said. It can range from like popular media, be it like television, music, movies, video games, branching into like actual like studio art or comic books, literature, things like that. And I think as long as something is something that actually has substance to it, something that actually contributes, and ideally gives out a message that says something and actually like gives the reader something to go away with, something that actually contributes to their understanding of the world in a more legitimate way. I think that can be an artistic thing, even if it doesn't necessarily fit within the mold of what I feel like a majority of people might think. Um, Obviously there are some topics that are pretty taboo that different people choose to use as either inspiration or direct something that's just like directly brought up. But at the same time, I feel as long as it's certain things need to be addressed in certain contexts, and even if it's not something that's palatable to every person who digests it, doesn't mean that it's necessarily something that should be like censored or like not shown or buried. I think
Yeah.
everybody's got a different story to tell.
I feel like I agree with Kevin. I think it's like a case by case basis. Like you're either okay with it or you're not. I mean, you have South Park, which just does the wildest shit ever, but it's all like commentary. I want to say, like, I feel like some people struggle to realize that it's commentary, and then when you are doing these how do we put it? Like these things that are frowned upon, I guess, in your art, your whatever media that be. Um, I feel like it has to, like Kevin says, have a message or be somewhat tasteful. Like, it can't just be like, oh, rape for the sake of rape, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know about that. Like, Kevin, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
How do you feel about Tropic Thunder, Kevin?
Well, I mean, I honestly I haven't really like seen that movie all the way through, but I mean, are you referring to like a specific part of it?
Talking
Like
about
Robert
the
Downey
fact that
Jr.'s
RDJ does
character.
blackface for the entire movie, essentially.
So, I mean, I think I've talked about this with Chris before at some point, either in
Yeah.
our private conversations or on the podcast previously, I'm not sure, but obviously like, I don't personally think in general that, in the current era that that's necessarily something that should be utilized, I
Done.
guess, unless it's something that's like, I guess, trying to like harken back to or demonstrate maybe something that was done in the era where that was a thing that was like normalized.
Yes.
But if it's I guess if it's something that's like used, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of like hot ticket, example, because like, it's not like they were necessarily trying to be offensive with it, but at the same time, it is still a white man portraying himself as a black man. But I don't want to say too much because I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know exactly like what context it is, that
I'm not gonna
he
lie to you.
portrays the character.
I love the movie. I love that character. I just think it's ridiculous. I shouldn't. It's bad. It's pretty bad, but 2008 was a different time. Not that it justifies it. I'd like to think of it as like, and it's really not, because if you look at it, it's just a movie with a bunch of white guys made by a bunch of white guys. You know what I mean? But I like to think of it as like, it can be looked at as a commentary on the whitewashing that goes on in Hollywood even to today. I mean, you have one predominantly black character in the film that they're making in the film, and they cast a white man in it to do blackface. It's kind of like how Matt Damon was like in The Great Wall, or like those kinds of things. I think it can be looked at
how
as that.
How people think Keanu Reeves is the last samurai, or
Yeah.
Tom Cruise, I mean. It was Tom Cruise, right, in The Last Samurai?
Yeah, Tom Cruise was in The Last Samurai.
Yeah, sorry. And so like people think he's the last samurai when it's actually I'm blanking on his name right now, but an actual samurai in the movie. And they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
the last samurai, it's got to be Tom Cruise because he's the main character, right?" It's like, "No." But he brought up a very interesting point that it's like a case by case basis, and one of the things that makes me think when it comes to like especially Tropic Thunder as a example is when who do we decide to give that power to tell us what is acceptable and what isn't? And I think that's like the catch-22 when it comes to all this sort of things where it's like who told them they couldn't do the blackface in Tropic Thunder, and how many of those people did they disregard and make the movie anyways? And like where does that line stand? Like who, like, it's almost biblical with like the he without sin cast the first stone sort of idea, harkening back to the title of this podcast, Burning Bush Podcast. But like where do we put the power? Because like I know there's been big cases about Mortal Kombat when that first came out, and how the ESRB, the mature rating system, came out as a result of Mortal Kombat kind of breaking the barrier of video games, like the first ever just gore fest video game. And like they brought it to the Supreme Court where they're like, obscenity, like it when you see it, was the ruling that they made. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Like where do you guys think that we can find conclusion with that? Like who has the right to say that?
I don't know, because like I want to say the people, but at the same time, it just goes to a case by case basis of what you think is right versus what you think is wrong. I just don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, oh, sorry. Go on.
No, go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think in regards to like specifically like video games, Mortal Kombat, for instance, like I feel like obviously that game wasn't supposed to be marketed, nor do I think it was marketed towards children, like people who are actually going to probably be offended by that. I don't think you're going to see like a bunch of religious folks, a bunch of like older folks who are just going out and buying the super violent game. But I feel like it's very common, in society for anything that causes, like this sort of like provocation, this sort of disturbance amongst, maybe a little bit more like of a tame, or I don't know, whatever phrase you want to use, more potentially not like politically conservative, but just like culturally or like traditionally conservative person, probably wouldn't be a purveyor of, a product like that. But at the same time, like people love to pick up every little thing and make an issue out of it, even if it doesn't relate to them or even affect them. And they're just thinking, oh, we need to preserve the so-called like sanctity of our society, of our people, or else this is going to like impact us and we're somehow going to be, perverse or like outside of what we should be, But to go back to the thing about the movie, obviously, like you said, in the grand scheme of things, regardless of, if there, I don't know, I can't imagine there were, but I don't know if there were like protests or like a lot of like response to Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal in that film, as a black man, and I feel like it is important to consider the voices, of people who could be offended or impacted by a certain image, especially if it's associated with their community, say like the black community responding to that. But at the end of the day, it's up to the studio and people who are in charge of making the movie to decide what they end up doing. There have been a lot of things over history that have been released regardless of what the consumer or what critics thought. So I feel like at the end of the day, as long as something, in my opinion, and this applies in most contexts, as long as something isn't seeking to just damage and like slander or bring down a person or people, I don't think it's necessarily like the worst possible thing.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you guys. Do you think there's such a thing as someone being too sensitive in regards to this, or too, like, obviously not with the RDJ blackface thing, but like, I remember one time I took this theater class at school, intro to drama or whatever, and we watched a TED talk with a lady who was doing character performances, and I believe she was black mixed with some like Middle Eastern, and she was doing all these different characters, and she was getting into all these different characters, and she was doing these accents, and she was doing these different mannerisms. But some of these people were like, of a Latin background. Some of these people were like, I don't want to say she did an Asian background because I think that would have been a little like, a little too much. But she did like the Indian accent. She did like a Latin accent. She did, a couple of different accents, and there was one girl in the crowd who was just like, I just don't think that's okay. I just don't agree with that. I don't see why she should be doing other people's culture. That's just never okay. And it's like, to me, it's like, oh wow, look at that art. Like, she wasn't doing it in a disrespectful way. Sure. And like, obviously, I mean, she probably shouldn't be playing those characters in a film, but for the sake of the performance and the character work, she was showing us an example. And I don't know. I just was like, oh, okay, like that's a bit much. But
yeah.
What did you guys' opinion on that?
I'm pretty staunch on my opinions in that sort of regard, where people that get butthurt way too easily are in of themselves their own case to look at, because like full disclosure, like I do almost every single night now, which I need to tone back on it, like a very stereotypical Latin or Hispanic, whatever, accent, and I understand the controversy of Hispanic, but I do that like almost every night just as a joke. But I think what people really get hurt about that, or they don't think it's funny, is because they think they're personalizing their attack towards someone in particular. Like they're thinking of someone that they're making fun of in particular, and even though it's just as bad for some people to consider, it's like, well, you're thinking everyone of that, for example, race in this example, or ethnicity sounds like that, which is disingenuous to most of the people that do those sorts of impressions or jokes in some sort of seriousness. Like you were saying, Kevin, where it's like not maliciously attacking, because like we play Call of Duty, Kevin and I, all the time, and you get people, spouting, calling people the wrong kind of gay, that sort of stuff.
Oof.
And
they're recording those chats now.
Hard R's and whatnot. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, that's obviously a case of just malignant hate. Whereas there's comedians, like that's the number one example I think of when it comes to all of this censoring of taste, because a million comedians out there do impressions. A million of them are not of the background of the impression that they're doing of, but if they're being censored from doing their own bits, which the point, you're going to a comedy club because they're joking. Like that's the preface of a comedian, is like, my life's a joke, so laugh at it. And when the comedians are getting, blacklisted, like Louis C.K., but that was a different issue. He jizzed on his chest while a couple of random girls walked in on him, and he was like, oh. And so now he's blacklisted as an SO. But that's unrelated. But the idea that like there are people that get butthurt super easily because they think they're being targeted, whereas it's a commentary, like you guys are saying, on something else. And stereotypes, as awful as some of them are, they're like grounded in some sort of reality. I know that that's like hard to justify, but like it's not like, and I'm not talking about the hardest of like what I was talking about earlier, the sort of just hate speech, but in certain mannerisms, there's like a bit of truth here and there,
Well, I think especially. Good.
Go ahead. No. That was my complete thought.
I think you're right, especially when you have.
Say that again, Dan?
Sorry, you cut out there, Dan. KGB, you just got your hands on your nose. Go ahead. You're back.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I think it, like, especially with that whole thing about stereotypes and whatnot, and how there's some that are grounded in truth, and you look at some of the comedians that, like, let's say George Lopez, for example, and he's talking about, like his parents, his Latino parents, and they're just like they're hard asses, they're strict, they have a certain way of doing it and stuff like that. And like it's kind of the stereotype, because it's like, oh, a lot of Mexican parents are like that, but at the same time, it's like he's joking about it, and a lot of people are relating to it because there's some truth to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't want to go like super hard into there's some truth to it, because I know there's a lot of examples of just pure, hate speech where that's
you gotta
not
watch
the
our
case.
P's and Q's here.
But like essentially, I guess my final verdict on that is, if it's not intended to put your culture, put your whatever your beliefs are down, like if it's making fun of it, then it's making fun. It's not making hate, you know? And I mean, there's a lot of that, but like some people don't take it the right way. And I mean, you gotta kind of under this fucking robot chicken foot.
Yeah,
Is
that is graphic. Oh my goodness.
It's so funny.
um,
Jeez, that is. Oh my
where it's
goodness.
like stuff like this, like, oh, I had a relative that was on death row, and this just doesn't rub me the right way. I'm gonna write a letter to Seth Green and call him something that he's probably already been called before, and like, what is that gonna accomplish? Like, there's it's the situation. It's not, for me, that's like the bottom line. It's like, I was in this similar class where it was called Race in America or something like that. It was one of my GE requirements. I think it was my PRGE requirement. And that was crazy because
perspectives?
Yeah, something. I mean, well, it's just like people were in 1984. There's something called like I'm gonna get this wrong, but like the 3 minutes hate, where you just everyone tunes in town to all the telescreens all around the block, and just start like mocking and jeering this caricature of this person named Goldstein, who's like the leader of the resistance. And so everyone has to mandatorily, throughout one point throughout the day, all just put aside what they're doing and just mock that person. And that's what that class was, for a lot of things. Like, they were getting really heated about like Speedy Gonzalez, which, like, they have to put that in front of their classical footage now, where it's like, this was a product of its time. And yeah, it's not okay today, but like, to really hang on to that level of hate is what, in my opinion, reduces the ability for people to get along. Just like, you're always going to hold on to some sort of animosity, and like,
okay, yeah.
I understand like the problem with that, but like, also, in order to heal, you kind of have to let those wounds close up, but yeah, that was the class where it was just like, we looked at a bunch of stuff like that, and it was all bad, but it's just like, history is supposed to teach us not to repeat it, but like, for them, it was like payback. It was like vengeance. It was like, okay, look at all these things, these are all fueling our hatred, fueling my feeling of animosity, and now I'm angrier than I entered this classroom. And so I wasn't really happy with how most people saw that, because like, I know it's wrong, but like, we're here to look at the history of Americana and the idea of what this country has evolved from, not what we are, entirely still, because I know there's a lot of discontent in the country, but it's I don't know if you guys agree on this. It's certainly better than it was 50 years ago, at least, right?
At least on the surface, I'd say.
On the surface.
And I feel like it really depends where you're at,
Yeah, you dig around enough, you're gonna find.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I understand that completely, but are there? I mean, that's true. I'm not trying to put that down. I guess the major things, though, like, ethnically
Was the Cinnamon
separated
commercial too controversial?
I mean, is it? I was like very invested in the battle that the apple and the cinnamon had, but did I think of him being Jamaican or a racist caricature by a white voice actor of a Jamaican? No. Does that make me like have to redact my feelings towards these ridiculous commercials because now I know? I don't know.
And see, that's the whole thing. That's in regards to everything we're talking about here. Be it comedic or otherwise. Like, it's all about context. You've got to consider who your audience is, who could potentially see something. What what your message is intended to be. And it's like, if you're not trying to like directly dismiss somebody or like invalidate somebody by what you're doing, then what's the point of making an issue out of it? Like, it's literally for the purpose of entertainment. It's not supposed to be something that goes out of its way to push people. Well, I'm not gonna say push people's buttons, but this video is very distracting.
God damn it.
Yeah.
The audio is fucked up too. I don't want to play it though.
Please don't. Please don't.
It's just like
we're not ready for it.
If something's literally just being put forth or used as a form of entertainment or media of any sort, like it's at least worthy of considering, like you said, to like see where it's come from, how it applied in the context within which it was originally established, and see how it relates to today. Like everything's worthy of consideration, even if it's not something that you personally would necessarily choose to engage with regularly or expose yourself to, even if it's something you don't agree with, like it's still important to learn about and, like I said, consider in comparison to what you're familiar with.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear also what you guys disagree with or what you think needs to be said that maybe I haven't said, obviously, and that's your perspective that definitely makes that you would say is important to bring up.
In regards to like censorship?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I don't want to steer the conversation is my point. I don't want to like try to put words in your guys' mouth because I know like I tend to
You
lean
picked
one
a
direction.
lot of videos that are real fucked up.
And it's super bad. My liked videos.
Bald, bro.
My liked videos.
Oh, the
is
Michael
a curse.
Jackson thing.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I mean, like if you guys like feel like there's something that I'm saying that might not be exactly like where you line things up with, feel free to say those, and I prefer to hear those because I've been recently reading a lot of Christopher Hitchens, and if you look him up, he's kind of an asshole, but he's got really crazy stuff that he talks about and like existentialism and all that. And one of the most famous things he was saying was like, even if he was referring to a play, I forget what it was called, but the play states that if there's one person, like even if 100 people have the same mindset and agree of things, it is not just important to hear the one person who has a contrary opinion, even if it's wrong, but it becomes the most important thing to hear him out rather than shut him out and deal with that way. But that also sounded like a loaded way of putting things. But what I'm trying to say is I want to hear what you guys have to say too, because I think like one of the themes that I try to do on this podcast is like complete and total open forum. Notwithstanding like not hate speech or anything like that. I've never had any of that to deal with, but like, especially if you have a strongly disagreeing opinion, or if there's like one way that you think that is the prevailing opinion or the one different opinion. I think that's one of the most important aspects that I try to keep going. But yeah, if there's anything else that you wanted to add to that, whether it was agreeing or contrary to what we've just been talking about, censorship in general,
Again, I think it's just like a case by case basis, because it's like there's some censorship. I don't know. I mean, like I think it just depends on the person. Opinions are like assholes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 What about you, Kevin?
Well, I mean, one of the things I was going to say, I mean, you already touched on, but I was just going to say, like, obviously, if it's something that, and I think oh, were you saying something, Dan?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on this before, but, I'd say, like, the number one thing, in my opinion, in general, is, if something is literally solely for the purpose of upsetting people, for hurting people, for, showing that, say, like, I'll just be specific, like a racial thing, like you said, hate speech. If something like that is being spread, I don't think that in any context should be protected. I don't think that's something, obviously everybody's entitled, First Amendment to free speech, but I just feel like there's certain types of discourse and conversation that aren't really necessary in the public space, especially if they're just I don't know, I just feel like there's certain opinions that are disseminated with a particular intention and not for the purpose of like, like you were getting at, trying to like sort of contribute to just a conversation, a dialogue, if it's literally just for the purpose of like saying, this is what I think, this is the truth, and if you doubt it, then you're wrong. I don't think that contributes to anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it also. I think Kevin's right. But I also think like, because I mean, you're right, Kevin. And there's some topics you just shouldn't do it because it's just like it doesn't contribute to anything. I agree 100%. And this isn't honestly even connected to that. I just think like a lot of times it is again case by case, and then it's just like how much life experience you have. I guess I don't know because Kevin, would you say you're still really
I'm not sure exactly what you said, Dan. I think you might have cut out, but I
Religious?
think really religious. Was that what you said? I'll give him a second to buffer.
religious or
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
for the past, I don't know what it's been like. Honestly, I'm trying to think. It's because obviously it's been a while since we were in college now. Probably for at least like the past, I'd say honestly like 3 to 4 years. I have not been somebody who practices Christianity. I pretty much distance myself from the church. My mom is very religious. I live in her house, so often, she'll talk about things or bring things up or like reference things, that are from a Christian perspective. And, like I acknowledge them, I let her voice her opinion, but, I don't let it necessarily like sway me in my way of thinking. I'm pretty firm with what I believe at this point, just allowing everybody to sort of, or just like consider most, if not all, perspectives presented in the situation and like take all that information, and have it as something that can help you form and shape what you believe. That's sort of how I live. I try not to just like fall into one line of thinking.
Would you say you still believe like in God and Jesus, or like how are you in that regard?
I'd say in terms of my views, I'm pretty atheistic at this point.
Okay.
I think I think that, a lot of different faith backgrounds and communities have a lot of interesting things to say. Actually, I'm reading a book right now called Love and Rage, The Path of Liberation Through Anger by this guy named Rod Owens, who's actually like a black queer Buddhist lama. And, so obviously that's coming from, you know, one angle that I understand from the black community, but also from, you know, um, a different religion that I'm not as familiar with, as well as, the queer space. So I think it's very important to consider those things, and hear what people have to say. But like I said, when I was reading earlier, I was thinking, some of the stuff in here isn't necessarily stuff I align with or stuff that I agree with, but I think it's still interesting to think about and consider how it can fit into your own discourse and your own ways of going about things.
How do you stand, Dan?
Huh?
Where are you, Dan, on the religious spectrum? I guess nowadays.
I think I believe like in a God and like Christianity, but like at the same time, like I'm cool with everything. You know what I mean? Like I remember at one point, like, and I think I asked Kevin this, and like obviously things are completely different now, but at the time I was like, Kevin, so does that mean everybody who doesn't believe in Christianity just goes to hell? And you were like, you wouldn't answer it, but like you were beating around the bush at the time, but you were basically like, yeah. And I was like, but like that just means you got the short end of the stick because you were born, and like that kind of stuff is like, whoa there,
Yeah,
Yeah. That's how you get war started. But
yeah, there's a
sorry.
whole lot of craziness, in regards to Christianity and things that, be it on the Protestant side or the Catholic side or anything in between, and obviously I can speak on some of those things as somebody who was previously very involved in the church, and, obviously, like, there are very broad perspectives amongst Christian people, and some people, believe in like a literal idea that, you don't have a relationship with God or, with Jesus or whatever, that, you're literally like, you're screwed, you got to repent, you got to make up for this, or
Yeah.
your life is like you're basically living for no reason. You know, you're going to hell and you need to find God. But there are other people who are like, you know, you're just on the wrong path. You know, you need to sort of reconnect. You know, rebuild that relationship. But yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay. To go back to like the point of the censorship and stuff like that, and my point of like it just depends on your life experience and where you are in life, because I mean, being that you have like majority atheistic views, like you wouldn't be offended by a comedic portrayal of Jesus right now, would you?
In general, I mean, no, you know, I find myself, you know, in my current moment, I mean, honestly, at times I do make, you know, disparaging remarks in regards to Christian ideals or certain things that they, you know, different groups represent, especially some more like fringe groups. Wow, that was a very intense accident.
You've shown us that before, Rose.
Yeah, I have. These are like some of my old liked videos.
Love
They're all
that.
so fucked.
Go ahead, Kevin. And then
Yeah, but I like I said, you know, I would never. Well, I shouldn't say I would never, because if I were in a conversation with somebody who was like, I mean, I think I've talked to Chris about this at least, but like, I don't know if you're familiar with like the concept of open air preaching, Dan, or like people, you know, like I think you probably saw it at UCSC, like people who would come and bring those like signs with just like pure hate, like, you know, like God hates, or like, you know, you're going to hell if you know if you're gay or you smoke weed or you're alcoholic or like crap like that. Like I don't, like I'm not. I'm somebody who that would be a context within which, you know, I would be a little bit more willing and unafraid to like say things to somebody and like say this is not okay, you know, this is not what I learned when I was a practicing Christian.
Yeah.
You know, but like if I was like talking to somebody who I knew was obviously like friendly, or even like my mom, you know, sometimes we'll have a conversation and, you know, we like I talk about things or I question things, or like, you know, maybe we don't agree on things, but like you know, it's not like I'm gonna just push somebody down because I believe something, you know, or and beyond Christianity, you know, other people that I interact with, you know, I like learning about people and learning about their cultures and, you know, where they come from, their backgrounds, and how they approach the world, what they've learned, because, you know, like in my opinion, you know, like, and this is one reason why I stopped practicing, just because it didn't really make sense, was the fact that, you know, like there are several billion people in this world, okay, and all these different people have so many different ways of living, have so many different understandings of what's right, you know, how everything came to be, how things continue. So I don't know, I just feel like it's like, how can one person, how can any group say that they're any more right than anybody else?
No, I get that.
Like, you know, literally, you know, there are people in all these other continents who have no familiarity with Christianity or anything like that, and, you know, they have, you know, all their different monotheistic, pantheistic relationships, or sorry, polytheistic relationships, and it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's weird for one group to discredit the
Another.
entirety of another and say that they're more right just because that's what, you know, maybe their holy book says.
So my whole reason for bringing this up again, going back to censorship and people's opinions and whatnot, and again, not to bring up old stuff, is, and like the reason I brought up the Jesus thing is because I remember it was sophomore year when you were still pretty practicing Christian.
Yeah.
And we're watching this show, Rose and I, Man Seeking Woman, season 2. I believe it's like episode 4 or 5. And Josh is trying to get at Rosita. I think that's her name, or Rosa. I don't know what her name is.
Mm-hmm.
And she's talking about her boyfriend, and everybody's like, he's so great, like he's so amazing. And the show is infused.
Oh, you cut out, Dan. Let's give it a sec.
I'm not listening to the audio. Is this like a conversation between Hitler and Stalin?
This is Magic Stalin? Oh my god.
Sorry, what were you saying, Dan?
So, but like the show is infused with magical realism, in which it takes like these fantastical elements that could never happen, and it infuses them into real life and everyday situations in order to drive home how, like, I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's like it's relatable because it's like, wow.
Yeah. First episode, his sister sets him up with a blind date with a actual troll.
Yeah.
Like a literal troll that lives under a bridge named Gorbachaka.
Yeah. And then when he reacts badly to the date and says she's a beast, she's a troll, he's the bad guy. Everybody's like, wow, really, Josh? Really?
I'm not the one you should be apologizing to.
So in the episode,
Oh, and
go
ahead. Sorry. No, I was
No,
just gonna say later that episode, it was she's dating Hitler. Her ex-boyfriend, or his ex-girlfriend invites him to her place to a party, and it turns out she's already dating someone else, and it's Hitler.
It's
like
Adolf,
as a
played by Bill
as
Hader.
a 118-year-old guy. Yeah.
Played by Bill Hader.
Played by Bill Hader.
So
But the
in
episode you're talking about, yeah.
I'm referring to, the girl he's trying to get at has a boyfriend, but he's just like, everyone's like, he's such a great guy, and he's like, how great could he be? Like, he can't be better than me. Like, I got this. I'm gonna steal her away. And the guy shows up, and the door opens, and it's just a golden beam of light because the boyfriend is actually Jesus Christ.
Yeah, played by Fred Armisen.
Played by Fred Armisen. Thank you so much, Rose. And I just remember, like, we're watching that show, and like the depiction of him in that episode is not negative whatsoever. Like, he's super.
He's literally Jesus. I love it when Dan cuts out.
I think I might be understanding what you're getting at least.
It's not negative in any way. It's not meant to be that way. It's just meant for the sake of the situation. And I remember you were in the room at that time, and I just remember how upset it made you. You're like, that's not funny. That's not okay. And like you stormed out of the room, and we were like, whoa. Like, I mean, at the same time, we were so enthralled in the episode that we did not go check on you, and I
Jesus
apologize.
lends him John Wick. It's like, you
yeah, and he's like, promise me you'll watch it. And I just think that, like, to go back to my point of like where you're at in life and your life experience, you know what I mean? Because now look at you, like, I feel like something like that would not even faze you now.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I'd say, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Our perspectives change as we're exposed to new things, as we, consider things for ourselves and learn more, potentially, at least in my experience, learning more about the truths and the things behind the scenes of like the Christian organization I was part of at the national level, things I didn't agree with, and just gave me more things to consider, and made me decide that based on that, as well as just other questions I had, didn't really make sense. So I think I don't know, I just feel like it's like you said, nothing is well, okay, I shouldn't say that. I'd say most things that, how do I even phrase this? I just feel like we as people, our mentalities and our perspectives are very malleable, and they develop as we meet more people, as we're exposed to people that teach us things, or
Right.
we're exposed to people who tell us things that we don't agree with, and they push us away. So I think I don't know, you just evolve into your more developed self, and maybe you drop behind things that you had before. At least that's what happened in my situation. Once I became, as I put it back then, disillusioned by Christianity and some of the things that I was hearing, and just the way that the community that I was in was functioning. It just was not for me, and I was like, this is not what I understand Christianity to be. This is not what I grew. This is not my understanding of things. And so, things just change, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just
definitely not.
Just the way that things go, and yeah.
And I think that also ties in like the episode into how you're like, well, if it has a message or if it's done in like a tasteful way, not to be like hurtful to a group of people. And that's really what the episode was, where it's like, it's not a negative depiction of Jesus. It's just that, like, to really drive home this idea of, oh, I like this girl, but her boyfriend's amazing.
Right.
And it's like, oh, her boyfriend's Jesus Christ. He's literally the Son of God. You know what I mean? Like, that show has a lot of just so many relatable episodes. Season 1, episode 10, when his ex-girlfriend invites him to dinner, and he thinks they're getting back together, and then she says she's engaged, and he's like, I'm fine, and his literal heart explodes out of his chest, and he's like, I'm fine, and she's covered in blood, and she's like, are you sure you're okay? And he's like, I love it. Link me to your registry. Like, I've had about 97 of those moments over the last 9 months. Like, Jesus Christ. So relatable. But yeah.
Definitely. So I mean, yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's really nice to hear both your perspectives on all these sorts of things, but putting it towards something we can all agree on. I have you here, Dan, again another week. I really wanted you to talk about some of the grievances we've had over. I'm thinking about Star Wars right now.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if there's been major changes in the world of comics besides Batman. Was it Batman, right? Batman's
Wayne
cut
getting
now.
censored.
And it gets censored, but like I think kind of relating it back to what we were talking about earlier, how do you think things might have been different if the landscape around I guess I don't even know where Lucas Films is anymore, because I know it was originally like mainly British actors, and then they went American with the prequels, and then this one they were like, I don't know. I have my own thoughts on it, but if we were living in a different reality or different
Kathleen
universe,
Kennedy is the
alternate
devil.
universe, Kathleen Kennedy she's like I don't know who you'd compare it to, but that person that's like Munchausen by proxy, where they're just feeding poison to their child and keeping them perpetually sick so they could just take care of them. That's what I feel like she's done to the franchise, as she's taken over from George Lucas, and sort of like his mad prophecies are all coming true. As horrible as George Lucas can be as a person, like he was a visionary, and most visionaries are troubled at times. And so I'm looking at you, Notch founder. What's his name, Kevin? That's
Marcus Persson.
Marcus Persson, freaking crazy radical guy now. But like all these people who have visions are often like that. And if George Lucas never handed the keys to the castle and he had his mocks, okay, and this is the Mandela effect in progress, Dan. Kathleen Kennedy is actively denying that there was ever any episode 7, 8, or 9 made by George Lucas. Like, she's straight up saying that no, that was actually a myth. It never happened. He never like finished all those things, and like I know people who are alive, like adults, when all that stuff was out, and they know the truth. Like, I don't know what to say. Like the soul of Star Wars, I feel like, is a prime example of how I feel personally, and you guys can disagree with this statement, but like how I feel personally, sort of the cultural zeitgeist has shifted the movement of something into something that it shouldn't have been, which I think is like a key example of the sequels for Star Wars. Like there's a lot of good that could have been, and there's still, like, I'm not gonna knock the movies as a whole.
They have their good elements.
They have their good elements, but
Kylo
it's just like
is the best part of Episode 9.
Kylo is Episode 9.
He is.
And do you mind spoilers, Kevin?
I mean, I probably won't be watching it soon, so.
So I mean, like, whether or not the studio that was making it had been different or more, like, for the love of God, Dave Filoni or gosh, why am I blanking on Iron Man? What's his name? Sorry.
Kevin Feige?
No, sorry.
Jon Favreau?
Jon Favreau. He was in Iron Man, but he directed. Which ones? Do you know which ones he's directed?
1 and 2.
1 and 2? Okay, for sure. And so, like, those guys are the heart of what most people like in Star Wars. They're not in charge of Mandalorian and a bunch of the spin-off series, and of course the Clone Wars and the Clone Wars spin-off series. They're not in charge because they got there from some sort of corporate power. And they're there because they're like diehard fans of their trades, and like, I mean, especially Dave Filoni, like, he's crazy how far he's driven the lore, and how they had all this lore to work with too, which I'm a firm believer that George Lucas had episode 7, 8, and 9 planned, and he literally talked to Mark Hamill about this. This is like the biggest evidence and proof. The biggest evidence and proof is that he talked to Mark Hamill, and Mark Hamill's quoted on doing this, saying
Like, he's getting mad about Mara Jade.
that saying that I want you in 30 years to come back as Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogies, or in the sequel movie, where like he's said that himself, Mark Hamill, and like they had all this planned, but instead we got what we got. We got episode 4 2.0.
It's good. It's entertaining.
We got Ryan Johnson's own movie. And then
it's a good movie. It's not a good Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Which means it's not a good movie.
It's just so much lore was broken in that and all that, and
the sacred text.
The sacred text, the death of Luke, and also the monsterization of Luke. The demonization of him as a bad teacher, as not a good person, all of that happened, and like it was almost a universal consensus that we didn't like what was going on in the movies. Episode 7 had rose-colored glasses, and then South Park came out with their episode, and like I guess I wanted to bring this up just because you're a pretty big fan of Star Wars. I'm a huge fan of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And like, what do you think happened? Because I know.
I think they shit the bed. Like, I don't know. I feel like the fact that they had 3 different directors and they didn't come up with a game plan ahead of time. J.J. Abrams has been like cited for saying, I don't really plan my endings out. I just see where the story goes. So it's like if they would have had something like a beginning and end, and they could have done something in the middle, that would have been great. But also just 3 directors and letting them do whatever they wanted. Like 7 is great and sets up so much. I mean, it's not great. It's episode 4, but it's entertaining and it gets you with that nostalgia. But then you have.
Oh, you cut out.
Episode would be great, and then you get episode 8 and you're like, wow, it just threw all that out the window. And then they're like, oh shit, that was horrible. So episode 9 throws all of episode 8 out the window, and it's just like, it's so disjointed, it doesn't even feel like a trilogy.
And George Lucas throws out a guy for talking about Mara Jade or bringing it up in the wrong way. Do you think that they were able to adapt, whether it be the original scripts for 7, 8, and 9, or even the legacy, the Legends content with Mara Jade and Anakin Skywalker? Like
Jason Dana.
I just got chills right now thinking about that saga, because it is like legitimately like Dave Filoni, like Jon Favreau's vision, where it's a tasteful re-envisioning of George Lucas's original sort of idea, and it was done so well too. And do you think like they could have done that and it would have succeeded?
If they could have, like if they would have just expanded the lore and gone for it, I think it would have been cool. I think what's really great about that expanded universe Legends books is that, like, oh my god, there's so much happening. It's the stuff we want to see happening. It's the kids, they're fighting, one of them turns to the dark side. What? You know what I mean? Oh, but he comes back. Luke's son isn't really into being a Jedi. You know what I mean? That's cool. Chewie dies. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you even get like the comics and Cade Skywalker 100 years later, and he's all drugged out because he doesn't like the Force. And you've got a new Sith Lord who's like, yeah, I was built in a Sith temple for decades or whatever. He's like, I don't believe in the rule of 2, so you have all these different Sith Lords running around, and it's just sick. Like, it builds on the lore. Like, it gives us what we really want. We don't want there's only 1 or 2 Jedi, or, you know what I mean? We want, like, multiple Sith Lords. We want the stuff we haven't seen before, which is why the Dave Filoni stuff is so good. And we want the stuff that like we get hyped for, I guess you could say. Like, we haven't seen it, we've theorized about it, you know what I mean? Something that gives us a taste. Like, we want Luke in the hallway killing all the bots. You know what I mean? We don't want Force Ghost Luke as he's found inner peace and then he fades into the Force, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't want Princess Leia suddenly going all space Jesus in episode 8. And then it's like, yeah, it turns out she had a lot of Jedi training. We just never mentioned it before.
Yeah, and her deep faked running sequence or whatever.
Exactly.
Do you think that Filoni and Favreau, throughout all of these expansion things, now that it's Disney acquired and they're working with Disney and kind of steering it in their own direction, do you think that they're like, it's already confirmed that they're having Thrawn in is it Ahsoka's or is it in one of the other
I
ones?
think it's Ahsoka's spinoff because she's looking for him.
Like they've already, like, as soon as that like becomes canon, which it already is, it sounds like they're bringing in expanded universe content into the lore, the official lore now. Like Death Watch Sabine is like my favorite character, and the fact that they brought her into Mandalorian, because Clone Wars is kind of like, you know, your redheaded stepchild when it comes to the lore, because it's technically not canon in some realms, but then it's like for most people it is canon. And like it blows my mind that they were trying to put most of the Clone Wars stuff into Legends, because it's like, what does it affect? They most of these people try so hard not to taint or tarnish the official series, be the movies, that they don't like step on the toes of the lore so much as to expand upon it, and that's why they call it that. But like, I feel like they're slowly bringing in all this expanded stuff, albeit you can't do anything about the sequel stuff because Mara Jade will probably never exist now. But you know, they're like bringing in all this stuff that was expanded and is now becoming official because it's, you know, on Disney fucking Plus.
Yeah.
I don't know, like that's what I'm hoping for.
That's what I too. I mean, they're starting to release comics and books that deal with the High Republic, which is like the before the prequels, like a couple hundred years before the prequels. Like you got a younger Yoda, he's more cocky. I'm liking that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? I'm down for some more Old Republic stuff.
And then
I think we
Dan
lost
freezes. But yeah, I mean, not to. Sorry, you cut out there, Dan.
Oh, I just want more badass fights, more Sith Lords.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wanted to bring up the prequels because I know you haven't seen episode 9, Kevin, and I know a lot of the stuff might not be familiar to you in particular, but like, one thing I like to bring up every time the sequels are brought up is that the prequels, it makes me realize that the prequels weren't as bad as I thought, because it was still Lucas's vision in the sense that
they really aren't.
In the sense that he like had a actual storyline that he was working with, and although it was not as cut and dry as, you know, evil empire versus ragtag rebellion, it was a very real political thing with like the Senate, and how Palpatine was so devious and genius that he was able to manipulate it his whole life and eventually overthrow it. As well as just the upbringing of Anakin, as like, people hate on Hayden Christensen. I hate on him replacing the Force Ghosts in the remastered edition, but like, he portrayed an angsty teenage boy who hates all the roles that he's being taught, and like, he played it so well, and that's why people hate him, in my opinion, is because he played the role so well, except for the sand line.
You got a good point.
But like, we hated on him because that was the point, I feel like, where it's like he's this angsty.
You are right. I appreciate him a lot more now.
Yeah, and the reason I brought those up too is the fights in episode 1 and episode 3 are, and even the ending versus Dooku and Anakin in episode 2 is just like, they knew what they were doing with those, whereas in episode 4 there wasn't any really. Episode 5, it was decent with him versus Vader, and then episode 6, him versus Vader, was actually a pretty cool fight. But like, episode 1 and 3 especially had, like, literally episode 3 had like a 20-minute fight sequence with him and freaking Obi-Wan. It's like straight up, it's crazy. But yeah,
so good.
I hope for the series. Kevin and I, we play a lot of Battlefront 2, and it's just such a cool universe. And I just wanted to hear what you felt about the series and all that before we hit our time, I guess. But
I think there's hope.
I think there's hope. There's probably going to be a new hope before the dark times.
A newer hope.
Yeah, but is there anything else you wanted to talk about? I mean, we can go over a little bit.
I'm good. I can't think of anything else to add.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we like to change it up. You know, we'll have like last week where we shoot the shit and that sort of thing. And then there's other episodes like this where we'll talk about things in particular, and it's always really cool to hear you guys' opinions because when you're in an echo chamber, you only hear yourself. So, but you know, I appreciate you coming in, Dan. You're always welcome to come back on. We got plenty of other stories. You need to get to your stories about Kevin, your Kevinisms, your shared experiences with him, the metal tarsal episode. That's gonna have to come up next time.
You play such a small role, but such a pivotal role at the same time.
There was no sock.
We won't discuss it yet because it's a spoiler, but just stay tuned for next week, hopefully.
Alrighty, well, thank you both for showing up, and it has been once again Burning Bush Podcast.